once you've got the floor, that's it.
Well, that's it.
You're in prime control. I just wanted to say to you, thank you very much for mentioning Bishop Mulcairns at Mass yesterday. I think of Bishop Mulcairns every day. And the reason is Bishop Mulcairns gave his life to the church, he gave his life to his God, and the way he was treated at the end of his life is, I think, beyond disgraceful.
Yeah.
He was, admittedly, he had a few bad apples amongst, and I say the clergy, not the priest, I say the clergy in his diocese. And the last few months when he was in the nursing home, he was just treated something terrible, and obviously somebody had tipped off the room he was on, and for the last few months of his life, it was every time he looked out his window from his nursing home, there was protest ribbons outside, so he could not get away from that. Then when he passed away, he had to have his funeral in the nursing home chapel. He couldn't have it in his own cathedral, and then he was buried in an unmarked grave. And as I said, I just think of Bishop Mulcairns every day, and I sincerely thank you for not letting his memory pass, Bishop. I appreciate that. The other thing I want to say also, we've got our two New Zealand brothers here today. Brother Richard, when I was the Supreme Knight, Brother Richard came to me and said, look, we've lost our connection with the Southern Cross Australia. Southern Cross Australia has lost our connection with Tasmania. We need to reinvent that. And that was solved. So I thank Brother Richard for that also, because we've now got a very strong bond again with New Zealand, and the fact that we've got the New Zealand Supreme Knight here this weekend, and the National Secretary here this weekend, and Brother Brian and I have been over, I think, to New Zealand to their conference 3 times. So we've re-established our very strong contact with the Knights of the Southern Cross in New Zealand.
We're even going to give you a candle.
And the fact that they're here today to represent the 100 years in Australia, which of course Southern Cross New Zealand came out of Southern Cross Australia. So I thought I would just mention that as well, those two things. The thing I was going to mention was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Yeah, thanks, 30 minutes, that's good, Brother Brian. Yeah. One of the best things that ever happened to me was joining the State Council in Victoria, because I then got to know the brothers in the branches in Victoria, and now I've extended that to the brothers in South Australia as well, being a member in South Australia as well. And then I joined the National, and I got to know all you brothers and the brothers right across Australia. And as the IACK President, and being lucky enough to be elected as the IACK President, I've now come in contact with brothers right around the world. And one thing I have learned, no matter whether that's in Australia or in New Zealand or in Africa or in Europe and all the other countries where the Knights are, that as Catholics we certainly do have a common bond. They have the same issues that we have, attacks on the church, attacks on the clergy. I'm not going to say struggling for membership, that's not correct, but the same issues as far as practicing our religion goes. And in a lot of countries, those brothers and their wives, I should say, that have to fight for their religion. You know, I mentioned Pakistan. We have trouble communicating with Pakistan because of the issues in them practicing their religion. The churches, we're very strong, the Knights are very strong in Nigeria. They've had a lot of their churches bombed and so on. So we're sort of very lucky in our countries, in Australasia, where we can practice, and it's getting a bit more difficult, I suppose, but we can practice our religion freely. Ghana was mentioned, and I will mention Ghana a little bit. I got invited over to Ghana last October, and in the negotiations with Ghana prior to my going over there, which was always 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning, they don't seem to know there's a time difference, or they don't worry about it. And in one of the conversations they said to me, and I thought, yes, going to there, that was in effect their 3-year conference. That's what it was. Same as what we have, and I look around here and we've got our Triennial conference and how many people are here. I sort of had it in my mind that it'd be roughly the same, maybe a couple of hundred. In the course of the conversations, they said to me, we're very worried that we don't think we're going to get the people into the stadium. And I thought, what do they mean? Only, a couple of hundred? And I said, how many people are going? And they said, we've got 6,000 bookings so far, and we expect 2,000 or 3,000 more bookings. So here we go, we're going to have a conference. We're going to have about 9,000 people there, and they were worrying about getting the people into the stadium. So I just say that's the strength of the Knights in some of these other countries, especially in Africa. Nigeria is the same, Ghana, Gambia, less members, but still a very strong organisation. And if you're talking about Africa, one of the things they have is they've got a lot of members in other countries, such as where there's been civil wars, Liberia, Ivory Coast, and all those countries around that area. So I arrive in Ghana, and they said, well, we've got a few things for you. One is we need to take you to see the President. So that was pretty good. And we also need to make sure that you're in the local press, the papers throughout Ghana and so on. So I had to go through a few press conferences. And I went and saw the President for 4 to 5 minutes, where we discussed climate change, because he said, what's happened in Ghana, they've chopped down too many trees, it's affecting their rainfall, and they haven't got any water runoff. And he said that's a real problem. But the fact that the Knights there, I thought of in such a frame, they were able to ring up the President, say, look, we've got the World President here, can we bring him to see you? And they said, no worries. And as I said to you, I got over the shock of being 8,000 people in this hall. And in fact, when I got there, it was actually a field, and it was all these hundreds of tents up. It was like a carnival atmosphere. And then they said, we've got one other thing for you. You will be on live TV to 8 African countries. I had to address 8,000 people. Suddenly there was all these TV screens everywhere, and things whizzing around, and my speech was broadcast to eight countries across Africa. So the Knights in these countries, and what I'm trying to say, especially in Africa, is very strong. We talk about the Knights of Columbus, and we know the Knights of Columbus have got millions of members, but they're also very strong in a lot of other countries as well. And one country that I was very surprised where the Knights are very strong was in Cuba. Cuba, America, how could the Knights of Columbus have such a strong following in Cuba? And they were absolutely surprised when I said, I'm surprised by that. They didn't seem surprised at all. But the Knights of Columbus have been expanding in a very big way. They're now in Canada, they've expanded into Seoul, they've expanded into Lithuania, and the Knights, as far as the Knights of Columbus go, are going across, are improving very fast. They have been trying to get into countries such as Sierra Leone, where we have Knights there, and that is against the rules of IACK. You're not allowed to go into a country. We had an incident, I think, in Victoria, where the man from the Knights of Columbus came and was encouraging the Knights of Victoria to join with the Knights of Columbus. But that's actually against the rules. And some of my work has been sorting out these little bits of issues, because the Americans have been saying things like this: it's our damn God right to go where we want to go. And we have to say to them, no, you can't, because we've got rules in place already. You can't go where there's Knights existing already. So the Knights around the world generally, and Catholicism also, I mentioned that as well, is going ahead pretty nicely. It's the Western world where we have the trouble. We know we're finding it difficult to recruit members. New Zealand's the same, South Africa's the same, Ireland's the same, and Great Britain's the same. And we're having issues in those countries, but generally, if you're talking America, or you're talking Africa, or the Philippines, they're actually booming, and the number of Knights around the world is going ahead very well. So I just thought I'd mention that to you. I've got my glasses here, but I can't see it. I better put them on. But I think that's about all I had to say, Brian. I won't take up too much time. But I just thought I'd try and give you just a little overview. Yeah. No, there is one other point I'll make, and that is, of course, the international office is run from Ireland, so we have phone hookups and computer hookups every so often, which is how it's a bit difficult to control an office in Dublin from Australia. But having said that, I think we've done it very well. The IACK has only ever had 2 Secretary Generals in its history, and we look like having to find a new Secretary General after the next IACK meeting. And that's been a bit of a challenge, but there's a number of people that are actually, because one of those things really needs to be, the Secretary General really needs to come from the Northern Hemisphere. One of those reasons is that the Secretary General has to go to Rome 3 times a year. And in 3 times a year he goes there to see Cardinal Farrell. And Cardinal Farrell is the liaison for the Knights worldwide, and we get a briefing of what's actually happening in the church on a worldwide basis, and that happens every 4 months. So I just thought I'd mention that. And we need to find, it's been a bit challenging to find a new Secretary General for when Brother Niall does step down. But having said that, there's been a number of people that are putting up their hands and want to take on the position, but at the same time we need to get the right person.
Yeah.
So
Did you want to say anything about the upcoming IACK while you've got a minute?
Yes, I just mentioned it. The next IACK meeting will be in October, and that's to be in Glasgow. And if anyone would like to attend that, you would certainly be very welcome. I should also make one point, seeing as I'm there. It's a tradition that the international president, the international chaplain, comes from the same country as the president, and Bishop Tomlinson from Sandhurst Diocese will be travelling with me to Glasgow. He's the international chaplain for this 2 years during my tenure as president.
Excellent. Thank you, Brother Colin.
Thanks, brother.